Okay, so in this video, or videos, I'm not sure how many it will take, we're going to go through the process of rigging this little two-legged robot character. So before we jump into that, we're going to talk a little bit about the tools and sort of the organization of how we're going to do this. As a overview of what rigging is for, what we're going to do is we're needing to set this up in a way that it is more efficient for the animator to get a good performance out of it. We don't want the animator fighting with technical issues. They need to be able to just grab some controllers and move this character around and it deform in the way that they want it to deform. And so that's the purpose of rigging. And some of these things may not be immediately evident to you, but stuff like if I wanted my character's hips to dip, the feet aren't going to know to stay stuck to the floor. They're going to just go to the floor, right? And so we have to set up quite a few different things to make that work. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about some of the tools we're going to be using. So I have my character organized here. You'll notice I named everything. This is a very important step because later this is not just me being hyper organized. This is me needing to know what parts represent what part of the model. So when I come back later, I can know what I'm selecting, because eventually this outliner is going to be stacked with tons of things in here, and we want to be able to find what we're looking for very quickly, or it's just going to slow us down entirely. So make sure you name everything. Currently I've selected everything in my outliner, or all the models in my outliner, and I'm just going to put those in a layer so I can quickly toggle those on and off. And I will name this mesh layer. Okay, and then for this part of the video, I'm just going to go ahead and hide this and turn on my grid so we can just look at some of the tools we're going to be using. Now, a lot of the tools we're going to be using are in the rigging menu set. So if you want to drop down to your menu set, you're probably already in modeling or animation or something, and so you can go into rigging. And the tools we're going to be using are in the skeleton, the skin, and the constrain menu. And so those are a lot of the things we're going to be looking at today. So first, let's talk about a skeleton. I'm going to go ahead and here, I want to create a joint. Okay, and so when I click here on the screen, you'll see that all it really creates is this little orb, and I'm not in wireframe mode. This is just what it looks like. So you can see that I'm actually in rendering mode. It just doesn't actually have a visible. If I rendered this, it's not actually going to have a visible render to it, right? It's just this little marker in space, right? And you'll see it's joint 1, and when you look over here, you'll see it has a different icon, the mesh. And so if I start clicking while that's selected, it will add another joint, and it will connect those two. Right? Now my second joint is selected, and so I can just go through here and sort of create a quick joint chain. Now by default, it is going to look for the creation of this joint chain is going to look for some sort of axis to constrain it to, and you'll see that what it's chosen was just the grid, which was a good choice in this case. Now, whenever I'm ready, I can hit enter, and now I have a full joint chain that is completely editable. So I can click on that. I can move it, and I'm moving the whole thing, but you'll see that if I click down here, lower, it's still staying connected, but it's working as a hierarchy. And we'll look over here and I see a little plus sign on the joint, and I can hit plus and it'll extend it down 1. I can keep doing that, but if I hold shift and hit plus, it'll extend the entire thing. And you'll see what I have is literally just parent after child after child after child, right? And I've talked about this in other classes, but if I select joint 4, it's not going to affect joint 2, right? It's only going to affect joint 4, 5, and 6. Right? This is like a folder structure in your computer, right? And so this is a parent-child relationship, or a hierarchy. So this is an interesting way that we have to think inside of Maya, is what is controlling what? What is the parent to what? Right? And in this case, what we have in this forward hierarchy, we call FK, or forward kinematics. So that means that if I rotate something higher in the hierarchy, like joint 2, it's going to rotate all of, or it's going to control all the joints below it. Right? Now, sometimes this isn't what I want, though. Like, imagine this is a character's arm, right? And I need to move its shoulder, and this is the hand on this end, right? And if I move that, that hand just goes through whatever I want it to go through, right? And if I wanted that to stay locked in place, I need another solution. And so that's why we have, inside of the skeleton options here, we have this create IK handle. So I'm just going to go in there and create this IK handle. I'm going to select the top hierarchy first, and then this one. And so now you'll see that I have this extra thing in here. It's like this little tick mark that sort of draws a curve all the way through it, and then a straight line. And so what happens now is if I move that, I get this, all of that chain in between it, all that hierarchy in between it is controlled by that endpoint. But still, if I grab this piece and move it, it moves around. If I select my IK locator there again and go to IK handle attributes, I can turn stickiness on. And one of the things you'll see is that now that will stay stuck in place no matter what the rest of the arm does. Okay. Now for it to figure this out, we have to have a bend in this joint. Okay. So that is an important element of that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this stuff that we have here. Delete my IK. And we're going to look at our character now and how we can start putting... Oh, actually, before I do that, I want to show you one more thing. So that joint chain is really just it's a nice hierarchy, but what does it do? Like, it's not renderable, right? So if I go to my front, well, before I go to that, I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this up, right? Maybe make it a little taller, probably make it a little slenderer as well. And I'm also going to put some subdivisions in it for height. And the reason for that is if, let me just kind of, oh, what happened there? Subdivisions for height. The reason for that is, as it is right now, if I right click on this and grab these vertices, I can't make this bend into a curve, right? Like, it's always going to be straight lines in between this vertex and this vertex because that's one long edge, right? So for that to actually happen, for us to actually be able to make a bend in that, we're going to need additional spans, vertical spans, right? So subdivisions in height, I can extend that up higher. And now, if I started grabbing stuff on this, you'll see that I can get more dynamic, deformation of this, right? So we need that to be able to get some actual good deformation for our rig. Okay? So the biggest thing to recognize is that I need to draw this in a orthographic view when I'm creating my joints, right? Because if I try to draw it from here, if I try to just draw some joints up through this, and I go in here and I just start creating joints, and it looks like I'm doing a great job. Look how good of a job I'm doing. And then I go here and realize, oh no, I wasn't. Right? I was doing a bad job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my right view. Okay, so I'm looking at it from the side. And with this setup, I'm just going to go ahead and start creating some joints in here. Now create joints, and this will allow me to see where I'm clicking. If I hold shift, it'll go perfectly straight, right? And I don't always want that though, so I'll explain that later. And then when I hit enter, I now have a chain of joints that are inside my model. Now you'll notice that you can see the joints inside of my model. This is because of a shading option I already have turned on. So if I go to shading, it's this X-ray joints. And so if I turn that off, you wouldn't be able to see it. But I like leaving that on when I'm rigging, so I can see that the joints are inside the model no matter. Basically, the joints will show through no matter what, where they're at. Right. So again, this is just a hierarchy, and you'll see that it's absolutely doing nothing. But if I select those joints and then I select that object, I can skin them. So basically, skinning them means I'm going to tell Maya that I want the joints to affect the mesh I have selected. Right. And if I hit bind skin, you'll see I have a whole bunch of options in here. We'll talk about some of these later, but right now it's going to bind to the selected joints, and the method it's going to use to bind those is the closest in hierarchy. We had a couple of others. We have closest distance and heat map and geodesic voxel, and all of these are like algorithms that are ran on this to determine how to distribute this weight. Right? So we can choose any of them right now, but if I click that, you'll see that now when I rotate these joints, that did not work. Why did that not work? Let's try a different scanning method. Skin, bind scan. I'm just going to do closest in hierarchy, and I'm going to leave that at joint hierarchy because I need all of the joints in that hierarchy to do it. So bind skin, and you'll see that now when I bend this, I'm getting deformation on that object, right? So I can animate these bends or these joints to get this object to deform the way I want it to, right? Now the way what is happening is each of these vertices on this model, right? Each vertex on the entire model are being affected by one or more of these joints, okay? And so how we can see which of them are being affected is if we, let me do that again, if I select the mesh and right click and do paint skin weights tool. So that'll open this up in our tools settings over here. If you don't have that turned on, it's a little hammer on the side. And you'll see that joint 1 is what I have selected now, and that means all of this area that is white is being affected by joint 1. Anything that is black is not being affected, and so the gray areas are sort of in between, right? And so if I wanted it to affect a little bit more of this up here, I can paint that with this brush. So, I don't know why that's not giving me the option. Interactive, yes, I do want interactive on. I don't know why it's not giving me the option to... Oh, it's because I'm on smooth. I'm going to set this to replace. My value is 1. And so if I wanted this one to affect it just a little bit more, I can sort of paint that on there. And now joint 1 affects more of it, right? I can also smooth that. If I can go to the smooth option here and hold down shift and sort of paint that. And we can also do this flood, which means if I hit flood while we had it on replace, it would completely replace all the weights to that first joint. But I can hit flood while I have smooth on, and it'll just kind of soften it a little bit. Right. So I can go to the next joint and soften that a little bit. And we can just go down through here until we get a little bit more of a softer deformation on this object. See? And now, as I affect this, as I change this, you'll see I'm able to get kind of an interesting little curl out of it. Right. So this is how we're going to set this stuff up, is with these joint deformers, but it's not a good idea to animate directly on the joints, so there's still another step beyond that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and delete all this stuff I've just done, and we're going to go back and look at our model again. Okay, I'm going to talk about what we're going to try to make our model do. The big things I want to achieve, I want to get her some legs. Okay, so I want to control for each of the legs, and I want those IK driven. I want them to stay stuck to the floor. That way if I move her hips, her feet will stay on the ground. Right, and I want to control her for her hips. So there's a lot of different things we can control on here, but I really want to minimize the number of things an animator has to manipulate to get a performance out of this. So I mean, as it is now, I could start animating it by moving each of these individually and trying to line them up, and then, you know, trying to bend this or squash this or whatever. That's just a pain in the butt. Nobody's ever going to do that. So we have to set up a way of rigging this. Before I start rigging them, I want to look at some stuff here. As I select the mesh, you'll see that I have a bunch of inputs in here. Certain ones will have more than others. Let me see if I can find one that has... Most of these are just UV stuff because I've actually already deleted this once. But here's one. I've smoothed it. I've got some tweaks on stuff. All of this is the history. This is information about how this model was created, right? And so everything has history on it, right? And that's messy because all of these things are actually still kind of tweakable. I can still make changes to some of them. And so it bogs Maya down. And so the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to select everything, and I'm going to do edit by type, or edit, delete by type. I'm going to choose history. Now, if you do this after we've skinned it or put a deformer on it, it will also delete that deformer. So we don't want to do that afterwards. We're going to do this first. Okay, so that's going to wipe that out and sort of clean up our models a little bit. The other thing I wanted to show you is our models are not all default. Like if I just created a polygon sphere, you'll see that that's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then 1 on scale, right? But if I select my character's body here, you'll see it's a little bit moved upward, right? And then we've scaled it and down a little bit in the top. A whole bunch of different values on all of these things. This one's all over the place. And so what we want to do is we also want to freeze those transformations. We want to put everything back to 0 again, just for cleanliness reasons. So I'm going to go Modify, Freeze Transformations. And now you'll see everything is 0, 0, 0, and 1. Right? So this is a much more cleaned up model. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and start putting some joints in this character. So again, I want to do mine from the right side. It's just the side I like. And in this view, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing some joints in there where I want them. So don't worry about it from other views, but you have to do this from the right side or the front view. You're going to have to manipulate some other stuff later anyway, so this is just the cleanest one. So if I go to Skeleton, Create Joints, the first joint I want is to be my hips, right? I want this to be my root controller. So I'll click that one there, and that's going to be the controller that or the joint that sort of drives the overall movement of my character, right? And then I'm going to hit 4 here so I can kind of see some stuff. And you'll see in here, this is sort of where the top of the leg starts deforming. So I'll put another one there. Now, this leg needs to have a little bit of a bend in it. Okay, if we draw it perfectly straight, we're going to have some issues. So you want to put a little bit of a bend in it just so the IK knows which direction to bend. So I'll put one there for the knee, and then I'll go back here, and I don't want this bottom piece to really deform very much. I want it to be a solid object, so I'll put another one right there for the ankle. Right. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to put one more right here for the toe, because I want this toe piece to be able to rotate sort of around that pivot point. Right. And then I want to click one more out here on the end, not necessarily because I need it, but more so I need it to be for visual reference, right? Just so I can see that that extends out to the end of the toe, because if I stopped there, I could still rotate that end joint, but I wouldn't be able to see the result of it. So this is more just for visuals for me. And then if I hit enter, you'll see that that's what I have now for my leg. Right? And you'll see what I was talking about, that now if I rotate it like this, I can see how the toe moves, versus if I didn't have that one, although the toe is rotating, you can't really see an example of it. So it's more just for visuals for me. Now the thing, and so that's my entire chain. Now the thing about this is I was creating this in the side view, and so if I go back to my perspective, you'll see that it put that like right down the center of the character. And that's okay, because that's actually where I wanted that center joint. I just need to move these joints over now. So I can go to my front view and just sort of slide those over until they're in place. Right? So now I have something that is kind of organized correctly. Okay, and that's all I really needed to do for that. Now, here comes some housekeeping, because we have to do this. In my outliner, I'm going to name all of these joints now. And so this is going to seem boring, but I want to name this top one root. Okay, and then all of these others, we're going, like this is the hip, right? But this is the hip on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and name it that way. I'm going to do L space hip. And when I do that, it'll put an underscore in there. So it'll be L underscore hip. Right? And so I'll do L space knee. And then L toe. And then on this one, I'm going to do L toe. And then I'm going to type end in big letters there, just so I know that that's not actually something I'm going to skin. That's just the end of the hierarchy for me. Okay, so now you'll see that these all have L's in them to let me know that that's on the left side, and that's going to be beneficial later. So when I'm going through and doing stuff, I'll be like, oh, this is the angle on the left, because I'm also going to have an angle on the right. Okay. Now I need this whole hierarchy chain mirrored to the other side. And so I could actually duplicate that. If I hit Control D, I could get a second one. But that's not the ideal way of doing it. And I'll show you how we would do that. If I grab this joint, I'm going to go to skeleton, and then I'm going to go to mirror joints. Now let's look at what angle we're going to have to mirror that across. We do our options box here. And so currently it's going to mirror it across XY, which isn't what I want. Like if we look at XY, that means it's going to flip it with the toe pointing backwards. And that's not what I want. What I really want it to mirror it across is YZ in my case. So I want it to mirror it across that YZ plane. Right? Now the other thing, and this is the really neat feature here, I named all of these with an L underscore. Well, once I mirror them on the other side, I want it to actually say R underscore for right. So what I can do here is search for L underscore, and anytime that pops up, I'll want it to replace it with R underscore. And so if I hit mirror now, I get a whole second chain on the other side, and you'll see that those are R named. Right? So this is feeling okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some IK in both of these. Okay, so I'm going to go to skeleton, create IK handle, and let's look at our options really quick. So before I do that, there's a couple of things I want you to change in here. Now we can always change these later, but if you don't change them now, they're not going to work. Or if you don't change them at all, then this isn't going to work exactly right. So the first thing is I want you to make it sticky. Okay, and instead of a single chain solver, I want you to make that a rotation plane, or rotate plane solver. Okay, and so now that I've done that, I can go in here and create my IK for that leg. Now it's going to look a little different. There's a ring around the top of it, but that's okay. I'm going to hit G to, well, I guess I can't do it that way. So I'm going to go to skeleton, create IK handle again. All of those settings are still set to the same. Click the top, click the bottom. And now I should have IK in that one as well. And so you'll see now I can do that, or I can grab this and do that. Right? Okay, so this is working. Let's see how long the video's going here. So we're at about 22 minutes now. Let's go ahead and stop here, and then we'll come back in a few minutes to talk about skinning and then setting up some controllers for this character. Okay, be back in the next video.